The Deep Space Monitoring Station picked up something that made every alien technician freeze at their workstations. Through the cosmic silence came sounds that chilled their blood, screams, roars, the kind of noises that spoke of massive predators tearing apart their prey. The audio signals bounced through the Galactic Federation's communication network. Like a plague of terror, Thren pressed his four-fingered hands against the smooth surface of his control panel and felt his heart rate spike. As the senior detection officer for the Aldery Peacekeeping Corps, he had heard distress calls from 100 different worlds, ship explosions, planetary disasters, the death cries of entire civilizations. But this was different. This was primal. This was the sound of something ancient and hungry feeding on the weak. The signals came from a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system. The star charts showed nothing special about the location, no valuable resources, no strategic importance. Just another rock floating in the void. But the sounds told a different story. Every few seconds, mechanical screams would pierce through the static. High-pitched whines that sounded like metal being tortured. Deep thumps that shook the very fabric of space. And underneath it all, a constant rhythm of smaller sounds. Click, clack, click, bang, thump, bang, the percussion of death itself, Thren's colleague. Voss leaned over his shoulder. The tall, gray-skinned Nexari had fought in 12 different conflicts across the galaxy. His species was known for their courage in battle and their ability to stay calm under pressure. But now his hands trembled as he adjusted the audio filters. "I have never heard anything like this," Voss whispered. "What kind of creatures make these sounds?" The computer systems worked overtime trying to analyze the signals. The Federation had databases filled with the sounds of every known predator in the galaxy. From the crystal-eating worms of Titan 7 to the shadow hunters of the Void Nebula. But these sounds matched nothing in their records. They were too complex, too organized, too terrifying. More data streamed in from the long-range sensors. The planet showed signs of massive conflict. Explosions bloomed across continents like flowers of destruction. Energy signatures spiked and faded in patterns that suggested coordinated attacks. And through it all, those sounds continued. The mechanical screaming, the rhythmic pounding, the chaos of predators at work. "We need to investigate," Thren announced to his team. "There might be survivors." The decision to mount a rescue mission happened faster than anyone expected. Within hours, the Federation had assembled a full diplomatic and military response. The peaceful Aldery provided the command structure. The warrior Nexari supplied the military might. The scholarly Zenthi brought their advanced technology. 3 species working together to save whatever remained of this unknown world. The rescue fleet consisted of 12 ships. Fast attack cruisers for protection. Medical vessels for treating survivors. Cargo ships loaded with supplies for refugee camps. Everything needed to handle a planetary evacuation. The Federation had done this before. They were good at it. They had saved 17 different species from extinction over the past century. As the fleet approached the blue planet, the sounds grew louder. The mechanical screaming became a constant wail that forced the audio technicians to wear protective gear. The rhythmic pounding shook the hulls of the ships, and new sounds joined the chorus, sharp cracks like breaking bones. Deep whooshes like something massive moving through air. The harmonics of pure terror. "Analysis complete," reported the chief. "Science officer. The planet shows signs of 2 distinct conflict zones. The landmasses are covered with what appear to be fortified positions. We are detecting energy signatures consistent with primitive kinetic weapons." Thren studied the tactical display. The planet's surface showed thousands of small heat signatures moving in organized patterns. Sometimes they clustered together. Sometimes they spread out across vast distances. And wherever they moved, those terrible sounds followed. "Are those the predators?" Voss asked. "Negative. Those signatures are too small, too organized. They move like military units, not hunting packs." The realization hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. The small heat signatures were not the monsters. They were the prey. The survivors were down there, fighting against creatures so terrible that the mere sound of their feeding frenzy could be heard from space. "We need to move fast," Friend declared. "Whatever is hunting them, it sounds like it is winning." The fleet moved into combat formation as they entered the planet's atmosphere. The sounds grew so loud that several crew members had to leave their posts. The mechanical screaming became a wall of noise that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The rhythmic pounding matched the heartbeats of the terrified alien rescuers. Through the chaos, they heard new sounds, voices, actual voices calling out in organized patterns. The survivors were trying to coordinate their defense. They were still fighting. There was still hope. "Take us down to the largest cluster of survivors," Thren ordered. "We save who we can?" The landing ships dropped through the atmosphere like falling stars. Inside each vessel, Federation soldiers checked their weapons and prepared for battle. They had no idea what they would find on the surface, but they knew it would be terrible. The sounds told them that as the ships touched down, the mechanical screaming reached a crescendo. The rhythmic pounding became a drumbeat of destruction. And through it all, those voices continued calling out, desperate, determined, human. The rescue teams deployed from their ships and immediately took defensive positions. The sounds were so loud now that communication required hand signals. The mechanical screaming seemed to come from all directions. The rhythmic pounding shook the ground beneath their feet, and then they saw them, the survivors, standing in organized lines, moving with purpose, making those terrible sounds themselves. The Federation soldiers watched in confusion as the humans went through their training exercises, loading weapons, firing at targets, reloading with practiced precision. The mechanical screaming was the sound of ammunition being fed into weapons. The rhythmic pounding was the percussion of gunfire. The organized voices were drill sergeants calling out commands. What the Federation had heard from space was not the sound of monsters hunting prey. It was the sound of humans preparing for war, and that realization was somehow even more terrifying than any predator could ever be. Steam rose from the morning coffee as Staff Sergeant Adams watched the sunrise paint the training ground in shades of gold and amber. The obstacle course stretched out before him like a familiar challenge. Every barrier and target positioned exactly where they had been for the past 3 years. Today was supposed to be a routine live fire exercise. Nothing more than another day of keeping his soldiers sharp and ready. The first sign something was wrong came from the communications tower. Specialist Rodriguez came running across the compound, her boots kicking up dust clouds with each step. Her face carried the kind of expression that meant either very good news or very bad news. In Adam's experience, it was usually the latter. "Sergeant, we have incoming aircraft, multiple contacts." Not showing any identification signals, Adams grabbed his binoculars and scanned the horizon. Strange shapes moved against the blue sky, too smooth to be any aircraft he recognized, too large to be civilian, and they were heading straight for the base. Sound the alert. Get everyone to their positions. The base came alive with activity. Soldiers grabbed their weapons and moved to defensive positions. The motor pool fired up vehicles and prepared for possible evacuation. The communications center tried to make contact with the unknown aircraft. Everything happened with the practiced efficiency of a well-trained military unit. The alien ships landed in the middle of the training field with a soft humming sound that made everyone's teeth ache. 12 vessels arranged in a perfect circle, each one gleaming like polished metal under the morning sun. They sat there for several minutes, silent and still, before hatches opened and figures emerged. Adams had seen a lot of strange things in his 15 years of military service. Desert mirages that looked like cities, weather balloons that moved like living creatures, experimental aircraft that defied every law of physics he knew. But nothing had prepared him for the sight of actual aliens walking across his training ground. They stood about 7 feet tall with gray skin that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Their faces were longer than human faces, with large eyes that reflected light like mirrors. They moved with careful, deliberate steps, as if they were afraid the ground might collapse beneath their feet. Hold your fire, Adams called out to his troops. Let them make the first move. The aliens approached with their hands raised in what might have been a universal gesture of peace. One of them, wearing what appeared to be a uniform with complex markings, stepped forward and activated a device that projected a holographic display. "We are the Galactic Federation," the device translated in perfect English. "We have come to rescue you from the creatures that hunt you." Adams blinked twice and looked around at his soldiers. They were all staring at him with the same confused expression. Private Wilson, who had been in the middle of cleaning his rifle, still held the weapon in his hands like he was not sure what to do with it. "I'm sorry, but what creatures?" Adams asked. The alien leader gestured toward the soldiers and their weapons. "We have been monitoring your world from space. We heard the sounds of the predators that hunt you, the mechanical screaming, the rhythmic attacks, the organized feeding patterns." "Mechanical screaming?" Adams repeated, trying to understand what the alien was talking about. "The terrible sounds that come from your weapons when the creatures feed on your ammunition. We have never heard such horrific noises. Our military experts believe you are facing predators of unprecedented size and aggression." The pieces started to fall into place in Adam's mind. The aliens had been listening to their training exercises from space. They had heard the sounds of weapons being fired and reloaded. They had interpreted the noise as some kind of monster attack. "There are no predators here," Adams explained patiently. "Those sounds you heard were our soldiers conducting training exercises." The alien leader's large eyes seemed to grow even larger. "Training exercises?" "Yes, we practice using our weapons so we can defend ourselves if necessary. The mechanical screaming you heard was the sound of our rifles being reloaded. The rhythmic attacks were target practice." The alien leader turned to his companions and spoke in a language that sounded like wind chimes being played during a thunderstorm. The conversation grew more animated as other aliens joined in. Finally, the leader turned back to Adams. "You're saying that your species makes these sounds voluntarily?" "Every day," Adams confirmed. "Sometimes twice a day if we have night training scheduled." The color seemed to drain from the alien leader's already pale face. "And the organized feeding patterns? Formation drills?" "We practice moving together as a unit." "The explosive sounds that shake the ground?" "Artillery training. We have a range about 5 miles north of here." The alien leader swayed slightly, as if he might faint. His companions moved closer to support him. They spoke in urgent whispers, while stealing glances at the human soldiers. "Perhaps we could demonstrate?" Adams suggested. "Show you what we actually do during our training exercises?" The aliens huddled together for another conference. This one lasted longer and seemed to involve more disagreement. Finally, the leader nodded slowly. "We would like to observe your training procedures. But we must warn you that our medical teams are standing by in case the creatures attack during the demonstration." Adams decided not to argue about the creatures. He signaled to his soldiers to prepare for a standard live fire exercise. The troops moved into position with practiced efficiency. Weapons were checked and loaded. Safety equipment was distributed. Range markers were set up. The aliens watched from what they clearly considered a safe distance. They had deployed some kind of energy shields around their observation area. Several of them held devices that Adams assumed were medical scanners. Others had what looked like weapons of their own. "Begin the exercise," Adams called out. The soldiers moved through their paces with professional precision. They advanced on targets while maintaining formation. They took cover behind obstacles and provided covering fire for each other. And through it all, they reloaded their weapons with smooth, practiced motions. The sound of magazines being slammed into rifles echoed across the training ground. The sharp crack of rounds being chambered. The metallic ring of empty brass hitting the ground. The rhythmic chorus of 30 soldiers reloading in perfect synchronization. The aliens reacted as if they were witnessing a horror movie. Several of them retreated behind their shields. Others activated their medical scanners and began taking readings. The leader watched with the expression of someone who was seeing his worst nightmares come to life. This is what you call training? He asked in a voice that shook with fear. This is just basic marksmanship, Adams replied. We have more advanced exercises that involve explosives and heavy weapons. The alien leader made a sound that might have been a whimper. More advanced exercises? Would you like to see our grenade training? The aliens had another urgent conference. This one was definitely an argument. Some of them pointed at the humans. Others gestured toward their ships. The leader seemed to be trying to maintain order while his subordinates debated their next move. Finally, the leader approached Adams again. We believe we may have misunderstood the situation on your world. How so? We thought you were being hunted by terrible predators. Instead, we discovered that you are the terrible predators. Adams considered this statement for a moment. We prefer to think of ourselves as well-trained soldiers. The sounds you make while reloading your weapons are the most frightening noises we have ever heard. Our species has nightmares about sounds like that. Really? Because to us it just sounds like good military discipline? The alien leader stared at Adams for a long moment. Then he turned to his companions and spoke in their musical language. The conversation was brief but intense. When he turned back to Adams, his expression was different, more respectful, more cautious. We would like to learn more about your military training procedures. But perhaps we should start with something less intense than your reloading exercises. Adams smiled. Sure, we can start with basic weapon maintenance. That is pretty quiet. The alien leader visibly relaxed. Weapon maintenance sounds much safer. Adams gestured for Wilson to bring over his rifle. The private approached with his weapon field stripped and ready for cleaning. The aliens watched intently as Wilson began to reassemble the rifle with practiced efficiency, the mechanical clicking of parts fitting together, the smooth sliding of the bolt, the sharp snap of the magazine being inserted, the metallic ring of the charging handle being pulled. The aliens began to back away slowly. Their leader's face had gone completely white. Perhaps we should discuss this further aboard our ship. Whatever you prefer, Adams replied, trying not to smile. But I should mention that we have a night training exercise scheduled for later. Today, you might want to warn your people about the noise. The alien leader made that whimpering sound again. Night training? Just some basic urban warfare scenarios, nothing too exciting. The aliens retreated to their ships faster than seemed dignified for representatives of an advanced galactic civilization. Adams watched them go and shook his head. If they thought basic training was scary, he wondered what they would think of actual combat. The universe had just become a much more interesting place. The afternoon sun beat down on the desert testing range as Dr. Hayes adjusted her protective goggles and checked her equipment one final time. As the lead xenobiologist for the Joint Human-Alien Research Committee, she had volunteered to serve as the primary liaison between the two species. The aliens had requested a formal demonstration of human military capabilities, and Hayes had spent the last 3 days preparing for what might be the most important scientific presentation of her career. Admiral Krex stood inside a specially constructed observation bunker 2 miles from the demonstration area. The massive Nexari warrior had commanded fleets across 3 different galactic sectors, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for what the humans called a basic weapons demonstration. His species had fought wars using energy weapons that could vaporize entire cities. They had faced enemies who could manipulate matter at the molecular level. Yet somehow, the primitive kinetic weapons of these humans filled him with a dread he had never experienced before. Are you certain this is a safe distance? Krex asked for the 4th time in 10 minutes. Hayes spoke into her communication device from the firing line. Admiral, you are approximately 3,000 meters from the nearest target. According to our calculations, you could survive a direct nuclear strike at that distance. Nuclear strike? Krex's voice carried a note of panic. You did not mention nuclear weapons in your briefing. We are not using nuclear weapons today, Hayes replied patiently. This is just a standard small arms demonstration. We will start with individual weapons and work our way up to crew serve systems. The alien observation team consisted of representatives from 12 different species. Each one had been chosen for their military expertise and their ability to remain calm under pressure. They huddled together in their bunker like children hiding from a thunderstorm. Their advanced sensors and recording equipment were trained on the human demonstration area with the intensity of scientists studying a new form of plague. Beginning demonstration, Hayes announced. The first human soldier stepped up to the firing line. Sergeant Murphy carried a standard military rifle. With practiced ease, he moved with the kind of confidence that came from years of training and experience. To the human observers, he looked like any other soldier preparing for a routine training exercise. To the aliens, he looked like a warrior preparing to summon demons. Murphy inserted a magazine into his rifle with a sharp metallic click. The sound echoed across the desert like a gunshot. In the observation bunker, several aliens flinched and reached for their emergency communicators. The mechanical precision of the movement was somehow more terrifying than any display of brute force. Standard infantry rifle, Hayes explained over the communication system. Effective range approximately 800 meters. Rate of fire 600 rounds per minute. Murphy raised his weapon and began to fire. The sharp crack of each round echoed across the desert. Dust clouds erupted from the target area as bullets found their marks. But what truly terrified the aliens was the sound that came between the shots, the mechanical clicking of the action cycling, the brass cases hitting the ground like metallic rain, the rhythmic destruction of targets at impossible distances. Reloading. Murphy called out. The magazine fell from his weapon with a hollow clatter. His hand moved to his belt and retrieved a fresh magazine in one smooth motion. The new magazine slid into place with that same sharp click that had started the demonstration. The bolt slammed forward with mechanical precision. The entire process took less than 3 seconds. In the observation bunker, the alien military advisors began updating their threat assessments. The speed of the reload was beyond anything they had imagined possible. Their own weapons used energy cells that required several minutes to replace. The idea of changing ammunition sources in seconds was revolutionary. "How many magazines can one soldier carry?" asked General Crix, the Federation's senior military strategist. "Standard combat load is 7 magazines, Hayes replied. "But soldiers can carry more depending on mission requirements." The demonstration continued with different weapon systems. Each one produced its own unique symphony of mechanical sounds. The deep thump of shotguns, the rapid chatter of automatic rifles, the sharp crack of sniper rifles. And through it all, the constant percussion of reloading procedures. The aliens watched in horrified fascination as humans demonstrated tactical reloads under stress. Soldiers moved between cover positions while changing magazines. They reloaded while running. They performed emergency reloads while lying on their backs. Each movement was precise and practiced. Each sound was sharp and terrifying. "Combat reload," Murphy announced as he dropped behind cover. The empty magazine hit the ground before his hand reached for the replacement. The new magazine was seated, and the weapon was ready to fire in less than 2 seconds. The mechanical precision of the movement was like watching a machine designed for destruction. "Speed reload," he called out next. This time the magazine change was even faster. The empty magazine was ejected while the new one was already moving into position. The two pieces of metal seemed to pass each other in mid-air. The weapon was ready to fire in barely over 1 second. The alien observers began to understand that they were not just watching a weapons demonstration. They were witnessing the systematic art of war. Every movement had been practiced thousands of times. Every sound had been refined to maximum efficiency. The humans had turned the act of reloading into a form of mechanical poetry. "Crew-served weapons," Hayes announced. A team of humans moved a machine gun into position. The weapon was larger than the rifles but operated on the same basic principles. The difference was the volume of fire it could produce. The mechanical sounds were amplified proportionally. The machine gun opened fire with a sound, like canvas being torn at incredible speed. The rhythmic hammering echoed across the desert like the heartbeat of some mechanical god. Dust clouds erupted from the target area as hundreds of rounds found their marks. "Reloading," the gunner called out. The ammunition belt was replaced with movements that seemed choreographed. Two soldiers worked together with perfect coordination. One fed the new belt while the other adjusted the weapon. The mechanical sounds of the reload were sharp and precise even over the echoing gunfire. "Rate of fire 1,200 rounds per minute," Hayes explained. "Effective range 1,800 meters." The aliens updated their calculations again. The volume of fire was beyond anything they had imagined. Their own weapons were powerful but slow. The humans had chosen quantity over individual shot power, and the mathematics of sustained fire were terrifying. The demonstration reached its crescendo when multiple weapon systems fired simultaneously. Rifles, machine guns, and grenade launchers all opened fire at the same time. The sound was like standing inside a thunderstorm made of metal. The mechanical symphony of reloading procedures created a rhythm that seemed to shake the very foundations of the Earth. The aliens watched as dozens of humans reloaded their weapons in perfect synchronization. The sharp clicks of magazines being inserted, the metallic ring of action cycling, the hollow clatter of empty magazines hitting the ground, all of it happening with mechanical precision across the entire firing line. "Coordinated reload," Hayes announced unnecessarily. The aliens could see what was happening. 30 soldiers changing magazines at exactly the same moment. The sound was like a single, massive mechanical creature taking a breath. The precision was inhuman. The efficiency was terrifying. In the observation bunker, Admiral Krex made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. He activated his emergency communication system and transmitted a priority message to the Federation High Command. "This is Admiral Krex. I am declaring a diplomatic emergency. We need to establish formal relations with the human species immediately. Not as a rescue mission, not as a peacekeeping operation, as a military alliance." The message was received by the Federation fleet still in orbit around Earth. Within minutes, it was transmitted across the galaxy to every major military command. The universe would never be the same. On the firing line, Hayes noticed that the aliens had stopped asking questions about the demonstration. Their observation bunker had gone silent except for the urgent chatter of what sounded like military communications. She wondered if they had seen enough. "Should we demonstrate the artillery?" she asked over the communication system. The response was immediate and emphatic. "No, we have seen enough. We would like to discuss terms for a military alliance." Hayes smiled as she signaled for the demonstration to end. The humans began to secure their weapons and police their brass. The same mechanical precision that had terrified the aliens was now being applied to the mundane task of cleaning up after training. The aliens had learned something important about humans that day. They were not just another species that had developed weapons. They were a species that had turned warfare into an art form. And the most terrifying thing about them was not their weapons. It was the casual efficiency with which they reloaded them. The vast digital archives of the Federation stretched across 17 different star systems, containing the collected knowledge of every species that had ever joined their peaceful alliance. Scholar Nim of the Zenthi had spent 40 years studying the historical records of 1,000 different worlds. She had analyzed the rise and fall of civilizations, the patterns of technological development, and the social structures that led to galactic peace. But nothing in her extensive education had prepared her for what she discovered in the human databases. The first revelation came from something the humans called Wikipedia. The simple, straightforward entry for a list of wars contained more conflicts than the Federation had experienced in its entire 3,000-year history. The numbers were staggering. The humans had been fighting each other continuously for over 5,000 years. There had been no significant period of planetary peace in their entire recorded history. "This cannot be accurate," Nim whispered to her research assistant, a young Althari named Pex. "The database must be corrupted." Pex pulled up additional sources to verify the information: military history websites, academic papers on warfare, documentary films about battles, government records from dozens of different nations. Every source confirmed the same impossible truth. The humans had never stopped fighting. They have been at war for their entire existence, Pex reported in a voice filled with disbelief. And they have been getting better at it. The Federation had encountered warlike species before. The Korthak had fought brutal campaigns for resources. The Vex had engaged in territorial disputes that lasted for centuries. But even the most aggressive species in the galaxy had eventually learned to resolve their differences through diplomacy. The humans appeared to have chosen a different path. The second revelation came from the military procurement records. The humans did not just fight wars, they industrialized warfare. They had created entire economies based on the production of weapons and ammunition. The scale of their military manufacturing was beyond anything the Federation had ever imagined. They produce over 12 billion rounds of ammunition per year, Nim read from a manufacturing report. 12 billion. That is more ammunition than the Federation has consumed in its entire history. The numbers kept getting worse. The humans had developed weapons factories that could produce millions of rounds per day. They had automated production, lines that required minimal supervision. They had created supply chains that could support military operations across their entire planet simultaneously. And this is just for their training exercises, Pex added. These are not wartime production. Numbers, the third revelation came from the tactical manuals. The humans had not just industrialized warfare. They had systematized it. They had created detailed procedures for every aspect of military operations. From basic marksmanship to complex strategic planning, every movement had been analyzed, refined, and optimized for maximum efficiency. The reloading procedures that had terrified the Federation were just one small part of a massive educational system. The humans trained their soldiers using techniques that had been developed over thousands of years of continuous warfare. They had created military academies that taught the science of destruction. They had established training programs that turned ordinary citizens into professional warriors. They have a manual for everything, Nim observed as she scrolled through hundreds of technical documents. How to clean weapons, how to maintain equipment, how to coordinate artillery strikes, how to conduct urban warfare, how to survive in hostile environments. The fourth revelation came from the historical battle records. The humans had not just fought many wars, they had learned from every single conflict. Each battle had been studied, analyzed, and incorporated into their military doctrine. They had created a system of continuous improvement that had been operating for millennia. The famous battles of human history read like a catalog of tactical innovation, new weapons, new strategies, new methods of coordination. Each conflict had pushed the boundaries of what was possible in warfare. The humans had turned military science into an evolutionary process. They do not just fight wars, Nim realized. They perfect wars. The fifth revelation came from the psychological profiles. The humans had not just developed weapons and tactics. They had developed a warrior culture. They celebrated their military history. They honored their veterans. They created entertainment based on military themes. Warfare was not just something they did. It was part of who they were. The reloading sounds that had terrified the Federation were accompanied by military traditions that went back thousands of years. The precision of the movements was the result of cultural practices that had been passed down through generations. The mechanical efficiency was the product of a society that had never stopped preparing for the next conflict. They have military holidays, Pex reported. Days dedicated to remembering their wars. Parades where they display their weapons. Ceremonies where they honor their warriors. The final revelation came from the current military spending reports. The humans had not reduced their military capabilities after achieving global communication. They had increased them. They were spending more on weapons and training than ever before. They were preparing for conflicts that had not yet begun. They are not satisfied with planetary warfare, Nim concluded. They are preparing for interstellar. Warfare, the research team spent 3 days compiling their findings into a comprehensive report. The document was classified at the highest levels of Federation security. The contents were too sensitive to be shared with the general population. The truth about human military capabilities would cause panic across the galaxy. The report was transmitted to Admiral Krex aboard the Federation flagship. The military commander read through the findings with growing alarm. Each page revealed another aspect of human warfare that challenged everything the Federation thought they knew about civilized behavior. They have been preparing for galactic warfare for centuries, Krex told his staff officers, without even knowing that galactic civilization existed. The tactical implications were staggering. The Federation had built their military doctrine around the assumption that warfare was a last resort. They had developed weapons and strategies for defensive operations. They had created military structures designed to maintain peace rather than prosecute wars. The humans had developed military doctrine around the assumption that warfare was inevitable. They had created weapons and strategies for offensive operations. They had established military structures designed to win wars, rather than prevent them. We need to reconsider our entire approach to galactic security, Krex announced. The humans represent either the greatest threat we have ever faced or the greatest opportunity. The decision was made at the highest levels of Federation government. The humans would be invited to join the Federation not as a protected species, but as a military partner. Their unique capabilities would be studied and integrated into Federation defense strategies. Their warrior culture would be respected and accommodated. But first, the Federation needed to understand exactly what they were dealing with. The research team was ordered to continue their analysis of human military capabilities. Every aspect of human warfare would be studied and cataloged. The Federation needed to know what they were adding to their alliance. The final section of the report contained the most disturbing finding of all. The humans had developed their military capabilities in isolation. They had achieved their level of tactical sophistication without any outside influence. They had created their warrior culture through purely internal evolution. What will they become, Nim wondered aloud, when they learn about the rest of the galaxy? The question hung in the air like a dark prophecy. The Federation had discovered a species that had turned warfare into an art form. They had found warriors who had been preparing for galactic conflict for thousands of years. They had encountered humans who made mechanical screams that sounded like the voice of war itself. The sounds of reloading that had first terrified the Federation now carried new meaning. They were not just the noise of weapons being prepared. They were the heartbeat of a military machine that had been running for millennia. They were the rhythm of a species that had never learned to stop fighting. The Federation would never be the same. The galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere in the depths of space, other species were about to discover what the humans had learned long ago. War was not the absence of peace. War was the natural state of existence. And the humans had spent 5,000 years learning how to excel at it. The emergency session of the Galactic Federation Council convened in the orbital station above the neutral world of Harmony Prime. 200 representatives from across the galaxy gathered in the massive circular chamber, their voices creating a symphony of concern that echoed off the crystalline walls. The agenda contained only one item, but it was the most important decision the Federation had faced in over 1,000 years. Council. Speaker Zara of the Villani called the session to order with 3 strikes of the ceremonial gong. The sound reverberated through the chamber, bringing silence to the assembled delegates. In the center of the room, a holographic display showed the small blue planet that had become the focus of galactic attention. "We are here to discuss the human proposal for military alliance," Zara announced. "Admiral Krex will present the Federation military assessment." The massive Nexari admiral moved to the center of the chamber with the measured steps of a warrior who had seen too much combat. His gray uniform bore the decorations of 12 different conflicts, but his expression suggested that none of those battles had prepared him for what he was about to report. The human military capabilities exceed our most optimistic projections. Krex began. They have developed weapon systems that are primitive by our standards but effective beyond our calculations. More importantly, they have developed a military culture that makes them ideal partners for galactic defense. The chamber erupted in questions and concerns. Representatives from peaceful species questioned the wisdom of allying with warriors. Military delegates demanded more specific information about human capabilities. The debate continued for hours without resolution. The decision was made for them by an external force. The long-range sensors detected a massive fleet approaching from the outer rim of the galaxy. The ships were configured for war, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that could reduce planets to ash. The Dominion had finally made their move. "Hostile fleet detected," announced the station's defensive coordinator. 500 vessels on approach vector, estimated arrival in 6 hours. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. The Dominion had been planning this attack for years. They had waited until the Federation was distracted by the human contact before making their move. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. "How long until our defensive fleets can respond?" Zara asked. 12 hours minimum, replied Fleet Commander Voss. "Our nearest battle groups are spread across 3 different sectors." The mathematics of the situation were simple and terrifying. The Federation would face the largest military assault in their history with only the orbital defense platforms and whatever ships happened to be in the local area. Against 500 Dominion warships, their chances of survival were essentially 0. "What about the humans?" asked Representative Keth of the Morani. "Can they provide assistance?" Admiral Krex activated his communication system and transmitted a priority message to Earth. The response came back within minutes. Colonel Brooks of the Human Expeditionary Force was already preparing for departure. "The humans are deploying immediately," Krex announced. 1 battalion of infantry. Approximately 800 soldiers. The chamber erupted in shocked laughter. 800 primitive warriors against 500 advanced warships seemed like a joke. Even the most optimistic military analysts could not imagine how such a small force could make any difference against the Dominion fleet. "With respect to our new allies," said General Quinn of the Heterans, 800 soldiers cannot possibly affect the outcome of a space battle. Colonel Brooks arrived at the Federation station 6 hours before the Dominion fleet. His soldiers moved through the docking bays with the efficient precision that had become their trademark. They carried their weapons and equipment with casual confidence, as if they were preparing for a routine training exercise rather than the most important battle in galactic history. The Federation defenders watched in fascination as the humans established their positions throughout the station. They moved with mechanical precision, setting up defensive positions at strategic choke points. They checked their weapons and equipment with the same systematic approach they used for everything else. "Defensive positions established," Brooks reported to Admiral Krex, "ready for enemy contact." The Dominion fleet arrived exactly on schedule. 500 dark ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons charging with ominous energy signatures. They moved toward the Federation station like a wall of destruction, confident in their overwhelming numerical advantage. "This is Warlord Gorth of the Dominion Empire," came the transmission from the enemy fleet. "Surrender now and your deaths will be quick." The Federation had never surrendered in their 3,000-year history. They would not start now. Admiral Krex opened a channel to all ships and stations in the system. "All Federation forces, prepare for battle. We make our stand here." The first phase of the battle was a disaster for the Federation. The Dominion ships opened fire with weapons that could crack planetary crusts. The orbital defense platforms were destroyed in the opening minutes. The few Federation ships in the area were overwhelmed by superior numbers and firepower. The Dominion forces prepared for boarding operations with the confidence of victors. They had faced Federation military forces before and knew exactly what to expect: poorly coordinated defensive actions, minimal casualties, quick surrender once the situation became hopeless. What they encountered instead was something no species in the galaxy had ever experienced. The sound of humans preparing for battle, the mechanical clicking of weapons being checked, the sharp snap of magazines being inserted, the rhythmic percussion of hundreds of soldiers conducting final equipment inspections. The sounds echoed through the station's corridors like the heartbeat of some mechanical war god. "What is that noise?" demanded Warlord Gorth as his troops prepared to board the station. "Unknown," replied his tactical officer. "It appears to be coming from the station's defensive positions." The Dominion troops had fought dozens of different species across the galaxy. They had conquered worlds and enslaved entire civilizations. They were confident in their ability to handle whatever primitive defenses the Federation had established. The first boarding party entered the station through the primary docking bay. They advanced in standard formation, expecting to face Federation peacekeepers armed with basic energy weapons. Instead, they encountered something that had never existed in galactic warfare: the sound of humans reloading under combat conditions. The mechanical symphony began the moment the first Dominion soldier stepped into the corridor. The sharp crack of rifles firing, the metallic ring of empty cases hitting the floor, the rhythmic clicking of magazines being changed. All of it happening with machine-like precision under the stress of actual combat. The Dominion troops had never heard anything like it. Their own weapons used energy cells that required several minutes to replace. The idea of changing ammunition sources in the middle of a firefight was alien to their understanding of warfare. "Reloading," called out Sergeant Murphy as he dropped behind cover. The empty magazine hit the floor before his hand reached the replacement. The new magazine was seated and the weapon was ready to fire in less than 2 seconds. The mechanical precision of the movement was like watching a machine designed for destruction. "Speed reload," came another voice from down the corridor. This time the magazine change was even faster. The empty magazine was ejected while the new one was already moving into position. The weapon was ready to fire in barely over 1 second. The psychological effect on the Dominion troops was immediate and devastating. They had never faced an enemy that could maintain such sustained fire. Every time they thought the humans must be running out of ammunition, the mechanical sounds of reloading would begin again. "How much ammunition do they carry?" demanded the Dominion squad leader. His troops had no answer. They had never encountered a species that treated ammunition like a renewable resource. The humans seemed to have an endless supply of magazines, and they changed them with mechanical efficiency that defied understanding. The battle spread throughout the station as more Dominion forces attempted to establish beachheads. Each boarding party encountered the same terrifying phenomenon: the rhythmic symphony of human reloading procedures, and the mechanical precision of weapons being serviced under fire. The casual efficiency of warriors who had been practicing these movements for their entire military careers. "They reload faster than we can fire," reported one Dominion company commander. "That is impossible," replied Warlord Gorth. "Listen for yourself." The communication channel carried the sounds of battle from throughout the station. The sharp percussion of gunfire punctuated by the mechanical rhythm of reloading procedures. The Dominion commander had fought in hundreds of battles, but he had never heard anything like this before. The turning point came when the humans demonstrated their coordinated reloading procedures. 30 soldiers changing magazines at exactly the same moment. The sound was like a single, massive mechanical creature taking a breath. The precision was inhuman. The efficiency was terrifying. The Dominion troops began to retreat. They had never faced an enemy that could maintain such sustained fire. They had never encountered warriors who could reload their weapons faster than trained soldiers could react. The psychological warfare of mechanical precision had broken their will to fight. "All units withdraw to the ships," ordered Warlord Gorth. "We are facing an unknown military technology." "What technology?" asked his second-in-command. "They have weaponized the act of reloading. I have never seen anything like it." The Dominion fleet withdrew from the system in chaos. 500 ships retreating from 800 human soldiers. The victory was so complete that even the Federation defenders could barely believe what had happened. Admiral Krex activated his communication system and transmitted a message to the Federation. High Command. The humans have proven their worth as military allies. Recommend immediate integration into Federation defense forces. The response was unanimous approval. The species that had terrified the galaxy with their reloading procedures had just saved a galaxy with those same procedures. Colonel Brooks gathered his soldiers for a post-battle briefing. The men and women who had just changed the course of galactic history sat in the station's cafeteria, cleaning their weapons with the same mechanical precision they brought to everything else. Good work today, Brooks announced. Standard reloading procedures proved effective against enemy forces. The soldiers nodded and continued their weapons maintenance. To them, it had been just another training exercise. They had no idea that they had just become the most feared military force in the galaxy. The Federation would never be the same. The galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere in the depths of space, other hostile species were about to learn what the Dominion had discovered that day. The most terrifying sound in the universe was not the roar of massive weapons or the scream of dying civilizations. It was the mechanical clicking of humans reloading their weapons. It was the sound of a species that had never learned to stop fighting. It was the rhythm of warriors who had turned the act of preparation into an art form. The monster screams that had first terrified the Federation had become the sound of galactic salvation, and the humans had earned their place as the protectors of peace through the simple act of being very, very good at war.